I could keep singing. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday night. Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Since it is Wednesday night, it's pretty much, it's night here. So that means it's already Erev Thursday. And that makes it Rosh Chodesh Shvat. So Chodesh Tov, we're starting a new Hebrew month. The music that I'm always playing at the beginning of the show is a Hallel from a Rosh Chodesh featuring Moshe Storch. So I don't know if we're going to have musical Hallel tomorrow. I don't think so. But we will be reciting Hallel, even if it's not, so upbeat and musical like this one. Which we do every Rosh Chodesh, starting the new Hebrew month of Shvat, and that means it's a new moon, right? Every new month is a new moon. Okay, who's in the house? Yehud in South Carolina, Guy in Ohio, Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Karen in Northern California, Sharon in New Jersey, Bill, Shalom from Interstate 70, almost home. Joe in the Inland Empire, and Bell in Texas, Nancy, North Carolina, Renee in Indiana, Shandora in the Bronx, Frank in San Pedro, Marjorie in Georgia, Spencer in Connecticut, Alan in New York City, Elle in Southern California, Gail in Kansas City, Franco in Trieste, Italy in the middle of the night. We love you, Franco. Aoife in Florida. Really, I love all of you. It's so great to see your names every day. And I'm sure that there's a few people out there who are here every day, maybe live, maybe not. But you don't necessarily write your names there every day. So if you're alive, you don't have to do it every time. But put in your names. Let us know that you're here. It's great for me to know who's here every day. And you can put in the comments later, and I'll be sure to look. I only look during the show, but I'll check tomorrow. I want to see who's here every day. Absolutely fascinated by that. Okay, we are, with God's help, going to complete chapter 4 today. Our daf is page 39 here in Tractate Sanhedrin, the 24th volume of the Talmud. We're picking it up about halfway down 38b, which we got a good start on yesterday. But, we were sort of catching up from before when they did the double daf the day before. So we have a bit to do of 38b, and then I want to do all of 39, A and B. Excuse me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol v'yirah. And that will finish chapter 4. And this last daf here in chapter 4, we already started talking yesterday, these beautiful agadas or agadata, kind of the less legal rulings about what we're obligated or prohibited to do, and a little bit more philosophy, folklore, stories, helping to understand the human condition, the Jewish condition, the mystical condition. So Agadah as opposed to halacha, right? That's the stuff in the Talmud that is not halachas, that is not just laws about our obligations and prohibitions, is generally known as Agadah or Agadah. And we're actually going to be talking about the differences between Agadah and halacha today. But this page is just really rich with these stories and legends and philosophies that are in the Talmud. So I think you're going to really enjoy it today. Let's do it like this. That's my daughter used to say when she was 3 years old, running around the coffee table, let's do it like this. Let's do it like this. Okay, halfway down, page 38b. Generally, we've been talking about how based in a rabbinic court, sternly warns witnesses that it's a capital case. Defendant's life is on the line. If he's convicted, he'll be executed. And so we have to take our search for the truth very seriously. Okay, says the Gemara. We learned in a Mishnah there, not here, the Mishnah that we're talking about here, right? Mishnah number 3 in chapter 4. But we learned in a Mishnah there, where? In Avos 4:4. Pirkei Avos 4:4. Ethics of the Fathers, right? Jewish wisdom's greatest hits. That in Pirkei Avos chapter 4, Mishnah number 4, Rabbi Eliezer says, be persistent to learn Torah and know what to respond to the heretic. Okay, the heretic. La apikoros. Respond to the heretic. So we're going to use a couple of different words here for heretic. One is apikoros, a word we've encountered before. And the other is amin or amina in Aramaic. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer says, be persistent to learn Torah. And one of the reasons why you have to learn the Torah so thoroughly is so that you know what to respond to the heretic. Rabbi Yochanan says this was taught only with regard to a Gentile heretic or non-Jewish heretic, but not with regard to a Jewish heretic, as one should not respond to him. This is fascinating, right? So when the non-Jewish, right? They are going to talk a little bit about early Christians, but they're actually also talking about Zoroastrians, especially they're talking about idolaters, Roman idolaters, and other kinds of religions that were existing at this time, but that basically were avodah zarah, right? So people who were denying the unity of God, people who say there's multiple gods, multiple forces, etc., know how to answer them. But they're talking about the Gentile heretic. For a Jewish heretic, right, that's the apikoros, the Jew who should know better, but who has taken it, somehow into his mind to deny the existence of God, to question the existence of God in a really insulting way, to either, basically be there's no such thing as God in the world, or he's going over to the dark side, as it were, and worshiping the gods of the Romans or other idolaters. If he's a Jew, you don't even answer him. Why would you not answer the Jewish heretic? All the more so. We don't answer the Jewish heretic. Why? All the more so, if one does respond, he will become more heretical. His heresy is assumed to be intentional, and any attempt to rebut it will only cause him to reinforce his position. It's so interesting, right? This is why we also say you don't rebuke a scoffer. You do want to help people come to the truth, come to Torah, come to God, right? But you have to pick your moments, right? If it's somebody who's just going to dig in his heels and become even more heretical, then you're not doing him a favor by trying to show him the light, right? You have to much better to just show him love, right? They're not saying, and don't talk to him and kick him out of your house. God forbid it's a family member. In fact, be very loving. Maybe even say, I am a loving person and I will always be there for you. And one of the reasons is because, God taught me to be that way. God commands me to be that way. But you're not going to get into theosophical arguments with the Jewish heretic. But the non-Jewish heretic know how to answer him. Quite interesting. Rabbi Yochanan says, any place in the Bible from where the heretics attempt to prove their heresy, i.e., the heresy that we're talking about specifically, that there is more than one God, right? So idolaters. So the response to their claim is alongside them, i.e., in the immediate vicinity of the verses they cite. So classic example that the heretics will point to the Torah and say, what are you talking about? Your own text, your proof text of God indicates that there's more than one God. What? That's crazy. What? Why would they say that? Well, Genesis 1:26, the verse states that God said, "Let us make man in our image," employing the plural. So that's what the heretic would say. Look, your own book says there's more than one God. But the next verse in the Torah says, "And God created man in his image," employing the singular. And the verse states that God said, "Come, let us go down and there confound their language," after the incident of the Tower of Babel. Genesis 11:7. But it also states in Genesis 11:5, "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower," singular. The verse states in the plural, "There God was revealed to him when he fled from the face of his brother," in Genesis 35:7. But it also states in the singular, "To God who answers me in the day of my distress." So this odd switching in the Torah from plural to singular when we're talking about God. And of course, one of the names of God, which, just because I'm teaching it, I will say normally we don't like to say God's names at all, but in teaching, right? So it says Elohim, right? Now that is a name of God, and it's understood to be a name that suggests the judgmental side of God, the strict justice side of God. Now, normally when we're talking about that name of God, we would say Elohim. We just put a K in for the H out of respect so that we're not being flippant, with the use of God's name. So that's why you will often say, people will say Yud K Vav K instead of Yud Hey, etc. And again, it's just because they don't want to say the name, right? Or they say Adoshem, right? Instead of the more traditional Adonai, which I'm just saying so that we understand each other. But Elohim, the word has a plural connotation. So why would one of the names of God indicate a plural, right? There is only one God. I'm going to talk about a little bit here, but you already have it from the story that I shared yesterday on yesterday's page and told you that's my favorite story in the whole Talmud. When God sets out to create the human, which in a sense is going to be the crowning jewel of the whole physical universe, right? Because of all the other things that were created and all the stars and galaxies, the lights in the firmament, all the different creatures that swarm and fly and swim, the oceans, the mountains, everything. It is the human that can appreciate all the grandeur and magnificence of the rest of the creation, can appreciate that God made it, can, acknowledge God, thank God, relate with God, right? A sentient being. And prior to creating this crown jewel of all the creation, the human, what does God do? Consults with the angels. Now, it's very clear who's in charge, right? When the angels oppose the creation, that first band of angels and that second band of angels, God just wipes them out. And then the third band says, okay, you're the Lord of the world, you'll do what you want. But if that's the power structure, why does God bother to consult with the angels at all? One, to teach us a lesson, right? So whenever we're doing something important, no matter how much we're authorized to do it, no matter how experienced we are, no matter how much we know about that situation, it behooves us, it is wise to consult with others who can give an opinion on it. At the end of the day, you make the decision in your life, but to consult with others is wise. So that's one important reason, is to teach us that, not only just to teach us, to sort of make a demonstration of it, but it also shows that God, whose ways we are meant to emulate, has an unbelievable humility. Right? God is humble. God. Amazing that one of the qualities of God, the supreme being, the King of Kings, is humility, right? God is elegant. God is soft-spoken, right? God carries a big stick, but God is soft-spoken. God is humble. How much more should we? Another aspect of God's humility is that he has told us in the Torah, right, that when he commands us to do something and we do it, like bringing sacrifices, it gives a pleasing aroma. Does God, right? The whole universe is in God. Does God need the smell of a burning lamb to be pleased? Rashi says, it's a pleasant aroma because he commanded us to do it and we did it, right? He commanded us to do something that's for our good, not for his. He doesn't need our burnt lamb, right? But by giving us a structure of obligations and commandments and expectations, we can rise higher and be more magnificent beings. He does that for us, like a parent is pleased when the children are successful. But he also tells us in the Torah that we can anger him, right? That when we treat each other badly, when we turn to other make-believe gods and show ingratitude, right? That God is a jealous God and God becomes angry, right? We've seen a bunch of places in the Torah, God becomes angry. So how is it possible that the supreme being of the world, the creator of all things, the King of Kings, would care what we do? I mean, imagine that you would be pleased or displeased if an ant walked to the right or walked to the left. I mean, the ant does not have the power to please you or displease you. And yet God tells us that we have the power to please or displease God because God is in relationship with us. God loves us. The same way that our children can please us or displease us, God has enabled us, put us in a place where we could please or displease him. And he lets us know that, right? That's magnificent humility of God. Okay, so let's keep going here. So the heretic will say, well, look in the Torah, there's different places where God says, let us make man in our image, this plural. But the sages say, well, wherever there's this plural use, right next to it is the singular use. God has that plural for a reason. It's not to tell you that, there's other gods. Don't misread the Torah with your malicious intent, heretic. Rabbi Yochanan cites several examples where the counterclaim is in the same verse as the claim of the heretics. The verse states, "For what nation is there so great that has God so near to them as the Lord our God is whenever we call upon him?" Deuteronomy 4:7, where the term near is written in the plural, keruvim, but the term upon him is written in singular. Another verse states, "And who is like your people, like Israel, a nation, one in the earth, whom God went to redeem unto himself for a people?" 2 Samuel 7:23, where the term went is written in plural, halechu, but the term himself is written in singular. Another verse states, "I beheld till thrones were placed, and one that was ancient of days did sit," where the term thrones is written in plural, charsavan, but the term sit is written in the singular. And the Gemara asks, why do I need these instances of plural words? Why does the verse employ the plural at all when referring to God? And the Gemara explains this is in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. As Rabbi Yochanan says, the Holy One, blessed be he, does not act unless he consults with the entourage of above, i.e. the angels. As it is stated, the matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, plural. Daniel 4:14. God consults with the angels. And the Gemara clarifies, this works out well for almost all the verses as they describe an action taken by God. But what is there to say concerning the verse, I beheld till thrones were placed? Like I beheld until thrones were placed. So the Gemara answers, one throne is for him, and one throne is for David, meaning the descendant of David, the Mashiach, the Messiah. As it is taught in a Baraisa, one throne is for him and one throne is for David. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Yosei said to him, Akiva, until when will you desacralize the divine presence by equating God with a person? Rather, the correct interpretation is that both thrones are for God, as one throne is for judgment and one throne is for righteousness, right? One is for din, God sitting in judgment, and one is for tzedakah, doing what's right, implying in this case, God's mercy. The Gemara asks, did Rabbi Akiva accept this explanation from Rabbi Yosei, or did he not accept it from him? And the Gemara suggests, come and hear a proof to the matter from what was taught in another Baraisa. As it is taught in a Baraisa, one throne is for judgment and one throne is for righteousness. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Sounds like you got the message. Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah said to him, Akiva, what are you doing near, i.e. discussing matters of Agadah, right? Non-halachic concepts. Go near tractates Negaim and Oholot, which examine the complex laws of ritual purity, where your knowledge is unparalleled. Right? When it comes to making legal rulings, halachic rulings, no one is the equal of Akiva, so stick to that, Akiva. Don't get so involved in the mystical, philosophical stuff. Says Elazar ben Azariah. Rather, the correct interpretation is that while both thrones are for God, one is for a throne and one is for a stool. There is a throne for God to sit upon and a stool that serves as his footstool. Now, this is all very veiled, esoteric stuff. When we're talking about a throne for God, a stool, a footstool, a stool for God to rest his feet, yeah, God is not a person. So God is not corporeal. So if we're talking about what is the throne of glory, what is a footstool for God, we're talking about something very metaphoric, mystical, lofty. It's interesting. We're talking about Elazar ben Azariah there, and Akiva. There's a little bit of an allusion here, to the sages who were privately engaging in Merkava mysticism, right? The workings of the chariot. And this is stuff that is Kabbalistic. It requires initiation. It requires preparation. It's beyond the scope of today's class. But when we're talking about what does it mean, God's throne, just to be a little bit suggestive, we're talking about a place where God causes God's self to be revealed, right? So at Mount Sinai, for example, when the Torah was given, right, people heard God's voice and the mountain shook, the hills became like liquid, right? There was all kinds of unbelievable phenomena going on so that people knew that in the presence of miracles, something, that has never was seen before nor since. And you could say that kind of locus, right, on that day, that was God's throne, because God was causing the divine presence to rest somewhere where it could be seen, could be felt, could be experienced by humans in their bodies, right? So again, don't anthropomorphize things like throne and footstool. They're not. They're talking about these are lofty things, and they're just giving the kind of clues. Rav Nachman says this one, i.e. any person who knows how to respond to heretics as effectively as Rav Idis should respond to them. But if he does not know, he should not respond to them. And the Gemara relates, a certain heretic said to Rav Idis, it is written in the verse concerning God, and to Moses he said, come up to the Lord. That's Exodus 24:1. The heretic raised a question. It should have stated, come up to me. God is talking. So if God is saying to Moses, come be in my presence, come up to Shemayim, come up to heaven where I will dictate the Torah to you. So shouldn't God say, come up to me, not come up to the Lord? So the heretic is suggesting, okay, God is talking and there's some other Lord that he is inviting Moses to go see. That's what the heretic is saying. Rav Idis said to him, this term, the Lord, in that verse, is referring to an angel, and specifically the angel Metatron, whose name is like the name of his master, meaning God. As it is written, behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Take heed of him and obey his voice. Do not defy him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. says God in Exodus 23, verses 20 and 21. So this is the angel that God sent to lead the Jewish people through the wilderness. So the heretic said to Rav Idis, if this angel is somehow equated with God, well then we should worship him as we worship God. Rav Idis said to him, it is written, do not defy him. Do not tamer, right? The Hebrew word tamer, him. Which alludes to, do not replace me, tamireni, with him. That's exactly what we don't do, is worship the angel. In fact, that's where idolatry comes from. In the beginning, right, Adam and Eve and their family, they all knew who God was. God spoke to them, God created them. They all knew that there was only one God in the world. And over time, right, the world became filled with people, and idolatry crept into the world. So what happened? How is it possible that, the parents who knew that there was only one God and taught their children there was only one God, you would think that then those people taught the grandchildren of the original people that there's only one God. So at what point did the falsehood of idolatry creep in? And we've learned elsewhere that originally they said, okay, there's God, but, God is busy. So God has appointed, like angels or sort of like stewards, to run the world for him. And who are these stewards? The lights in the sky, like the sun and the moon and the stars, right? These are employees of God. But because God wasn't talking to everybody all the time, so the people started, sending their messages to God through his stewards or ministers, as it were. And then after a while, they got confused that these employees of God were somehow separate gods, right? And that's how idolatry crept into it. So God is saying, don't do that. Don't think that if I send an angel to perform a task for your benefit, that angel is somehow a deity in itself. And that's exactly why the angels are not independent. The angels don't have free will like we do. The angels are sent on specific tasks, always assigned by God. So do not replace me with him, says God. Well, the heretic said to Rav Idis, if so, why do I need the clause, for he will not pardon your transgression? What do you mean pardon? He will not pardon? The angel will not pardon? Sounds like he is an independent being. Rav Idis said to him, we believe that we did not accept the angel even as a guide, befar vanka, for the journey, as it is written. And he said to him, Moses said to God, if your presence, meaning you yourself, God, if your presence go not with me, raise us not up from here. Exodus 33:15, meaning Moses, very chutzpahdik, told God that if God himself does not accompany the Jewish people, then they don't want to travel to the land of Israel. And God, sort of like the way you have favorite children that is hard to resist their requests. Moses is God's favorite of all time. There never was a prophet before or since like Moses. And so God says, okay, I will accompany you personally. Now the Gemara relates, a certain heretic said to Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosef, it is written, quote, and the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. Genesis 19:24. So the heretic raised his question. It should have stated from him out of heaven. So a certain launderer said to Rabbi Yishmael, leave him be. I will respond to him. Right? Don't even stoop so low as to answer this heretic. Rabbi Yishmael, I can take care of it, says the launderer. This is as it is written. The launderer is now giving an answer to the heretic. This is as it is written, quote, and Lemech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, wives of Lemech, hearken to my speech. Genesis 4:23. So one can raise the question, it should have been written, my wives, and not wives of Lemech, right? Lemech is saying to his wives, listen up, wives of Lemech. Instead of saying, listen up, my wives. It says, I said to Nina, my dear, listen to Sal, right? Or my dear wife of Sal, listen to Sal. But I'm Sal. Why would I speak about myself in the third person? Because that's biblical style. That's why. One can raise the question, it should have been written my wives and not wives of Lemech. Rather, it is the style of the verse to speak in this manner. And here too, it is the style of the verse to speak in this manner. Rabbi Yishmael said to the launderer, from where did you hear this interpretation? And the launderer said to him, I heard it at the lecture of Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara comments, this is as Rabbi Yochanan said. When Rabbi Meir would teach his lecture, he would expound 1/3 halacha, right, the laws of obligations and restrictions, etc. 1/3 agadah, this kind of story, philosophical material, and 1/3 parables. Now, parables are a segment of agadah. Here, they're being sort of, split out as their own category. But parables are just a little bit more specific, stories that illustrate a more philosophical or mystical or, common sense teaching point, like a teaching story, right? And Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Meir had, i.e. he taught, 300 parables of foxes, and we have only 3. Now we're on 39a. And they are the parables concerning the following verses. The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. Ezekiel 18:2. And Leviticus 19:36, just balances, just weights shall you have. And the third verse from Proverbs 11:8, the righteous is delivered out of trouble, and the wicked comes in his stead. So it sounds like these 3 verses gave rise to 3 parables, but we have a note here from Rav Steinsaltz that actually these 3 verses allude to, or there is a parable that alludes to all 3 of these verses involving a fox and a lion. So here is the parable. There was a hungry lion who requested of a fox to show him a place to find food. The fox showed him a fat man, meaning food, and the fat man was deep in prayer. Well, there was a covered pit before the man, and the lion feared to attack this man, right? This fat, juicy man that the lion would like to eat. But the lion feared to attack him as he was deep in prayer. Interesting. The lion respected that the fat man was praying. The fox said, oh, you have nothing to fear. Neither you nor your children will be punished if you attack him. Only your grandchildren will be punished. Huh. Is that something you would do? Would you say, well, I can get away with this, and my children won't suffer, but my grandchildren will pay the price? So I think a righteous person would be like, no, I'm not going to do it. What did the lion do? The lion attacked the man, but the lion fell into the pit. That was the trap. And so he turned his head to the fox and asked him, according to your words, why was I punished? And the fox replied, you must have been punished for the sin of your grandfather. The lion asked, well, that's not fair. Is it fair that the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? Why should I pay a price for what my grandfather did? And the fox answered, yeah, you should have considered that before you attacked the man. As I told you, you would bring suffering to your grandchildren, and you went forward anyway. You're the seed of a grandfather who thought like you do. We continue. The Roman emperor, here we have a bunch of, keep talking about conversations between heretics and sages. Now it's the Roman emperor is going to put some questions. The Roman emperor, the Caesar, right, the Caesar, said to Rabban Gamliel, your God is a thief, as it is written, quote, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his sides and closed up the place with the flesh instead. Right, this is the story of how God took a piece of Adam from his side, and from that formed Eve, right? So the emperor is saying, did Adam consent? Right? God just put him to sleep and took. It's like God is a thief. God forbid somebody should say that, but he's a heretic who's saying it. So the daughter of the emperor said to Rabban Gamliel, leave him as I will respond to him. Right? She was a student of Torah, and she says to Rabban Gamliel, let me answer my father. She said to her father, provide one commander for me to avenge someone's wrongdoing. And the emperor said to her, why do you need him? And she said to him, armed bandits came to us this past night, and they took a silver jug from us, and they left a golden jug for us. The emperor said to her, if that is so, it should be that armed bandits like these should come to us every day. They took our silver and left gold in its place. We should be robbed like that every day. She said to him, and was it not similarly good for Adam, the first man, that God took aside from him and gave him a maidservant, right? Gave him a woman, his helpmate, to serve him? And the emperor said to her, yeah, but this is what I was saying. But if it is good for Adam, let God take his side from him in the open, not during the time of his sleep, his deep sleep, like a thief. And she said to her father, bring me a slice of raw meat. They brought it to her. She placed it under the embers, and then she removed it after it was roasted. And she said to her father, the Caesar, eat from this meat. And the emperor said to her, it is repulsive to me. Although he knew that this is how meat is prepared, seeing the raw meat made it repulsive to him. Is that interesting? Like, normal people, have seen their meat both when it's raw and after it's cooked. But an emperor, he never went in the kitchen in his whole life. So he's never seen raw meat. Now that he's seen it, he doesn't want to eat it. So she said to him, with regard to Adam, the first man as well, had God taken her from him in the open, she would have been repulsive to him. Therefore, God acted while Adam was asleep. The emperor said to Rabban Gamliel, I know your God, what he does and where he sits. Meanwhile, the emperor was moaning and groaning. So Rabban Gamliel said to him, what is this? Why are you in distress? Seems like you're distracted from our philosophical conversation that we're having about God. So the emperor said to him, I have one son in the cities overseas, and I miss him. So Rabban Gamliel said to him, I want you to show him to me. The emperor said, do I know where he is? And Rabban Gamliel said to him, if you do not know that which is on earth, is it possible that you do know that which is in the heavens? You're telling me you know all about God, what he is and what he isn't, where he is and where he isn't? You don't even know where your own son is. You're going to tell me about God? You don't know about something that's on earth. You're going to tell me something about God, who's everywhere, supernal. The whole universe is contained within God. What do you know about God? The emperor said to Rabban Gamliel, it is written in praise of the Lord, Psalm 147, verse 4, he counts the number of the stars, he gives them all their names. So says the emperor, what is his greatness? I can also count the stars. Rabban Gamliel brought quinces. Quinces. What's a quince? It's some kind of a fruit, right? Somebody tell me a little bit about a quince. Rabban Gamliel brought quinces, and he put them in a sieve, and he spun them. And he said to the emperor, okay, count them. And the emperor said to him, well, stand them still so that I can count them. And Rabban Gamliel said to him, the firmament also revolves like this, right? Relative to the earth, it's like the sky is always turning. We know that the earth is turning, but it looks to us like the sky, with all the stars that are in it, right, is making an arc over the sky from night to day. So Rabban Gamliel said to him, the firmament also revolves like this. Therefore, you cannot count the stars in it. Even if you could count the stars that are all in the sky, which you can't, but even if you could, right, they would keep turning, new stars keep coming, and then it's day and you can't even see them. The emperor said to Rabban Gamliel, he who created mountains did not create wind. Rather, two separate gods created them. Why is he saying that? What he's saying is that mountains are solid matter And wind is a kind of spiritual entity, the force of the wind. So says this idolatrous emperor that there's two different deities responsible, one for the physical matter and one for the more spiritual matter. And his proof is Amos 4:13. Quote, "For lo, he forms mountains and creates wind." Right? Different verbs. Forms mountains, creates wind. Rabban Gamliel said to him, if that is so, then with regard to Adam, as it is written concerning him, quote, "And God created," Genesis 1:27, and also in Genesis 2:7, "and the Lord God formed," right? So the words created and formed are used in different places about the creation of the human. So too, says Rabban Gamliel, should one say that he who created this did not create that? The fact that there's different verbs for the process of creation doesn't mean that there's different creators. Sharon says, I have a quince bush. The fruit is very tart, but kind of like an apple. Thank you. Okay. And where am I? So if you will claim that different gods created different parts of Adam, that will not suffice. A person has one handbreadth by one handbreadth of facial countenance. Right? You know, the face is about one handbreadth by one handbreadth. Okay. And in this small space, there are two types of orifices in it, eyes and ears. Should one say that he who created this did not create that? As it is stated, he that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? Psalm 94. So the verse employs two verbs for the eyes and ears alone. And the emperor said to him, yes, different gods created different parts of the face. So Rabban Gamliel said to the emperor, and at the moment of death, are they all appeased? Right? So what he's saying again, the emperor is saying is that there's one God responsible for physical creation and another for the more spiritual side of creation. And really he's distinguishing between the body and the soul. And so he's saying two gods form that. And Rabban Gamliel says, yeah, but we see that the body and the soul leave this world at the same time. So do these gods have to synchronize, their actions when they're sending a creature into the world and when that creature is dying? Rabban Gamliel is being very polite because it's the emperor, but he's saying your arguments are nonsense. Narishkeit. The Gemara relates, a certain magus, magus, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, right? And Amgusha, yeah, Amgusha is the way that it would be written in Aramaic. But these are the, basically the clergymen of Zoroastrianism in the Persian Empire, where the Jewish community is in Bavel. Right? So a certain magus said to Amemar, from your midpoint and up, like from your belly button and up, is the domain of Hermes, H-U-R-M-I-Z in English is how it's spelled, the god of good who created the significant and important parts of the body. And from your midpoint and down is the domain of Ahurmes, the god of bad. So, right, it's a non-Jewish heretic. So Amemar had an answer for him. Amemar said to him, if so, how does Ahurmes allow Hermes to urinate in his territory? A person drinks with his mouth, which is the upper half, but he urinates from below. The Gemara relates, the emperor said to Rabbi Tanchum, come, let us all be one people. This is a little bit similar to the story in Shechem, right? Shechem, where, the prince was in love with Dinah and said, let's all be one people. And Rabbi Tanchum has a similar answer that the sons of Jacob had. He said, well, very well, but we who are circumcised cannot become uncircumcised as you are. So you all circumcise yourselves and become like us. The emperor said to Rabbi Tanchum, well, in terms of the logic of your statement, you are saying well, but anyone who bests the king in a debate is thrown to the enclosure of wild animals, thrown to the lions. So they threw him to the enclosure, right? They threw Rabbi Tanchum with the lions. But the lions did not eat him, as God protected him. So a certain heretic who was there said to the emperor, this incident that they did not eat him happened because they are not hungry. It's not that he has some special protection from his God. So they threw the heretic into the enclosure with the lions, and they ate him. The emperor said to Rabban Gamliel, you say that the divine presence dwells in any place where there are 10 Jews, right? 10 men, a minyan. So he asked sarcastically, how many divine presences are there? If you say the Shekhinah, right, the divine presence, the presence of Hashem, some kind of manifestation of God's presence is there anytime 10 Jewish men are praying together, well, there's a lot of minyanim around the world, right? There's a lot of synagogues and shtibels and beis midrashes and yeshivas where, there's a minyan of men praying together. And so sounds like there's a lot of gods or a lot of divine presences of the Lord. How many Shekhinahs, right? That's the word for the divine presence. How many Shekhinahs are there? Is what the emperor is trying to make a gotcha with Rabban Gamliel. What did Rabban Gamliel do? He summoned the servant of the emperor and hit him on his neck, slapped him. Some say hit him with a hammer. And Rabban Gamliel said to the servant, like scolding him, why did you allow the sun to enter the house of the emperor? Who did the emperor invite the sun in? Did the emperor welcome the sun? Did the emperor open the door to the sun? Why did you just let the sun in without the emperor's permission? So the emperor said to Rabban Gamliel, well, the sun rests upon all the world. No one can prevent it from shining. We could shut our windows, but we'd like to have light in here, so of course the sun comes in. Rabban Gamliel said to him, and if the sun, which is one of 10,000 attendants that are before the Holy One, blessed be He, right? 10,000 just being a number to stand for a lot of stars in the sky, like the other lights in the sky, is one of 10,000 attendants that are before the Holy One, blessed be He. And if the sun, which is just one of those 10,000, and it rests upon all the world, the divine presence of the Holy One, blessed be He, all the more so rests upon the whole world. Of course, God could make God's presence known or felt or be present anywhere where there's a minyan. And if God wanted to be present, in 10 million places or 10 billion places, God could do that. A certain heretic said to Rabbi Abahu, your God is a jester. Why? Because he said to the prophet Ezekiel, quote, lie on your left side. He said that in Ezekiel 4:4. And then in Ezekiel 4:6, God says to Ezekiel, lie on your right side. God had Ezekiel turn from side to side, says this heretic, apparently for comic effect. In the meantime, a certain student came before Rabbi Abahu and said to him, what is the reason for the mitzvah of the sabbatical year? And Rabbi Abahu said to him, now I will tell you something that is fit for the two of you. I can show you why Ezekiel, right, seemed like God was making fun of Ezekiel, and why, what is the reason for the commandment of the sabbatical year, right? That when the temple is standing in Jerusalem, the Jews are living in the promised land, according to a Torah-based nation based around the temple. So every 7 years, the farmers don't plant. There's going to be enough food from the harvest of the 6th year to feed everybody for the following year. The land can rest, and all these people can focus on learning Torah rather than farming. That's what the mitzvah is, right? So now he's been asked, what is the purpose of that mitzvah? Rabbi Bahu continued, the Holy One, blessed be He, said to the Jewish people, sow, S-O-W, sow for 6 years and withhold sowing during the 7th year. Why? So that you will know that the land is mine. God says, the land is mine. But the Jewish people did not do so. Rather, they sinned. and consequently they were exiled from the land. The manner of the world is that in the case of a flesh and blood king whose province sinned against him, if he is cruel, he kills them all, everyone in this province who rebelled against him. If he is compassionate, he kills only half of them. And if he is compassionate and is full of compassion, he afflicts the leaders among them with suffering. So Rabbi Bahu explains, and so too in this case, the Holy One, blessed be he, afflicts Ezekiel in order to cleanse the sins of the Jewish people. God instructed him to lie down and suffer the same number of days as the number of years that the Jewish people did not observe the laws of the sabbatical year. A certain heretic said to Rabbi Abahu, "Your God is a priest. As it is written, Exodus 25:2, that they take for me an offering." And here, the word offering, the word that's there in Hebrew is teruma. What's teruma? That's the tithe that's given from a field, the first 2%, that is given to a priest, to a Kohen. So if we're saying we're going to give a teruma to God, it must be like God is a Kohen. And so the heretic asked sarcastically, when he buried Moses, right? Because remember, no one knows where Moses is buried because God buried Moses. God took care of Moses' final resting place. God did that personally. And so we don't know where Kever Moshe is, right? Where the grave of Moshe is. So that, because that would become such a holy site, it might actually distract the people, from their worship, the temple, etc. So God buried Moses. So this heretic being sarcastic and says, well, since God receives teruma, God must be a Kohen, but a Kohen is not allowed to bury people. He's not allowed to become impure for the dead. So how could God have buried Moses? That's what he says, right? So, and then he keeps being sarcastic. When he buried Moses, in what mikvah did he immerse to purify himself? And if you would say that God immersed in water, but isn't it written in Isaiah 40:12, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, right? That all the seas on earth fit in the palm of God's hand, metaphorically. So how could he immerse in them? Rabbi Bahu said to him, he immersed in fire. As it is written, for behold, the Lord will come in fire. Isaiah 66:15. So the heretic said to him, but is immersion in fire effective? And Rabbi Bahu said to him, yeah. On the contrary, the main form of immersion for the sake of purification is fire. As it is written with regard to the removal of non-kosher substances absorbed in a vessel, quote, and all that abides not in the fire you shall make go through the water, but the first thing you do is purify through fire, indicating that fire is preferable for purification to water. A certain heretic said to Rabbi Avina, it is written, and who is like your people, Israel, one nation in the earth, 2 Samuel 7:23. The heretic asked, what is your greatness? You are also mixed together with us. As it is written, all nations before him are as nothing. They are counted by him as less than nothing and vanity. Rabbi Avina said to him, one of yours, the Gentile prophet Bilam, has already testified for us, as it is written, it is a people that shall dwell alone and shall not be reckoned among the nations. Numbers 23:9. Bilam, right, a prophet who was not a Jew, said this about the Jews. The Jews are a nation apart. Teaching that where the verse mentions nations, the Jewish people are not included. Now on page 39b. The Gemara cites a related statement. Rabbi Elazar raises a contradiction. It is written in one verse, the Lord is good to all and his compassion is over all his works. Psalms 145 verse 9. And it is written in a different verse, the Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. And he explains this can be compared to a person who has an orchard. When he waters it, he waters all of it. Perforce the water reaches all parts of the orchard and he cannot discriminate between trees. This is the meaning of the verse, the Lord is good to all. By contrast, when he hoes around the trees, he hoes only the good trees among them. He hoes only around the good trees among them. Similarly, when God bestows goodness to the world, all receive it. When he protects people from harm, not everyone is protected. The Mishnah teaches, now we're back to our Mishnah, the final Mishnah of this chapter, about the judges explaining to the witnesses, to take everything seriously and how important and how precious every life is. Therefore, since all humanity descends from one person, each and every person is obligated to say, the world was created for me, right? If a whole world can descend from one person, then you should view the whole world was created for me. That's not arrogant, that's appreciative. Everyone should feel that way. The Mishnah then teaches that the court says to the witnesses, and perhaps you will say, why would we want to be responsible for the blood of this person? Right? Somebody asked yesterday, if it's true that, if I get my testimony wrong, if I make a mistake and say something that's true that actually was only a conjecture in my head, and then he ends up getting convicted and his blood is going to be on my hands, why would I want that? Better not to testify. But we're obligated to testify. And says the instruction, but be aware, as is it not already stated, when the wicked perish, there is song. Proverbs 11:10, it is good for the wicked to perish. So the Gemara teaches a separate verse relates that after the evil king Ahab, was killed, and the song went throughout the camp, 1 Kings 22:36. So Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina says the fact that the verse states the song and not a song indicates that it is referring to a song that was mentioned elsewhere. So accordingly, the verse, when the wicked perish, there is song, alludes to this episode. When Ahab ben Omri, right, the evil king Ahab, when he perished, there was song. That's the song that we sing when the wicked perish. So the Gemara asks, but is the Holy One, blessed be he, gladdened by the downfall of the wicked? Isn't it written in the verse describing the victory of the Jewish people in battle? Quote, he appointed them that they should sing unto the Lord and praise in the beauty of holiness as they went out before the army and say, give thanks to the Lord, for his mercy endures forever. 2 Chronicles 20:21. And Rabbi Yonason says, for what reason is it not stated in this praise, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever, as it is stated elsewhere, for example, in Psalm 118. And this is because the Holy One, blessed be he, is not gladdened by the downfall of the wicked. God wants there to be justice on earth, and the good should prevail over the wicked. But we are all God's children. Even the wicked, evil, vile, disgusting people in this world are God's children. And while they should be defeated and justice should prevail, God is not happy when he watches his children be destroyed, even if they're wicked. The Gemara comments, as Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman says that Rabbi Yonason says, what is the meaning of that which is written in the passage describing the splitting of the Red Sea? Or some say the Reed Sea. And the one came not near the other all the night, right? The army of the Egyptians, the Pharaoh and his chariots, and the camp of the children of Israel. One came not near the other all night. What is the meaning of this? So at that time, the ministering angels desired to recite a song before the Holy One, blessed be he, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, right? So now after, right, the sea parted, the children of Israel walked through, then the cloud that was blocking, the pillar of cloud and pillar of fire, that was blocking Pharaoh's chariots from chasing after them, went up, right? And now Pharaoh and all the chariots, well, Pharaoh didn't, but all the chariots, well, his horsemen, the mightiest army in the world, ran into, the space between the parted walls of water. And what happened? God released the water and they all drowned, right? And so we sing a song, the song of the sea, because on that day, the people who sought to kill us were drowned. Our enemy was destroyed. So the ministering angels, right, God's angels, then said, okay, well, these are your children of Israel. You love them so much. You brought them out of Egypt with a strong hand and outstretched arm so that they could come to Mount Sinai, receive the Torah, and worship you. So the fact that their enemies are dead is something to rejoice. So we want to sing up here in heaven. What did God say? The Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, my handiwork, i.e. the Egyptians, are drowning in the sea, and you are reciting a song before me. So apparently God is not gladdened by the downfall of the wicked. That doesn't mean we should let the wicked, skate because God won't like it. It's just that God personally doesn't enjoy, so to speak, seeing his children destroyed. God commands us to destroy the wicked. That is the right thing to do. Just don't expect God to be singing about it. Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina says he, i.e. God, does not rejoice in their downfall, but he does cause others to feel joy. It is appropriate for us to rejoice when our enemies are destroyed. The Gemara comments, accordingly, the language of the verse is also precise, as it is written, quote, and it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good, and to multiply you, so the Lord will cause rejoicing over you to cause you to perish. Deuteronomy 28:63. And it is not written that God will have joy. It is written God will cause joy. Yasis connotes causing joy to others, not that God will experience that joy himself. And the Gemara affirms, conclude from this inference that it is so. It is appropriate for us to rejoice in the destruction of our enemies, but don't expect God to rejoice in the destruction of his children. Apropos the death of Ahab, the Gemara cites another verse from the passage. I'm sorry we're going a little late tonight, but I'm going to keep going so we finish this chapter. Apropos the death of Ahab, the Gemara cites another verse from the passage. The verse states, and they washed the chariot by the pool of Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood, the end of Ahab. And the harlots also washed themselves there according to the word of the Lord that he spoke. That's 1 Kings 22:38. And Rabbi Lazar says the harlots, hazanot, that can be read as visions, chezonot. And the verse means to cleanse, i.e. to fulfill two versions, one of Micaiah and the other of Elijah. And this fulfills a vision of Micaiah, the prophet, as it is written, if you return all in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. Since Ahab died, Micaiah's vision was fulfilled. And it also fulfills the vision of Elijah, as it is written, in the place where the dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall the dogs lick your blood, even yours. Right? Elijah predicted to Ahab that he would be killed, and he was. Rava says the verse is speaking of actual harlots, not visions. Ahab was a frigid man who did not lust for women. And Jezebel, his wife, fashioned two forms of harlots for him in his chariot in order that he see them while traveling and become aroused. So accordingly, one would understand the verse as stating that the harlots were washed, not that they washed themselves. So the verse describing the death of Ahab states, and a certain man drew a bow offhandedly, letumo, and smote the king of Israel. Meaning he wasn't even trying to kill Ahab, right? But somebody was just practicing his arrows, practicing shooting arrows, and it was one that waywardly killed Ahab. Rabbi Lazar says letumo should be understood as offhandedly, lefi tumo, without aiming for Ahab. Rava says this alludes to the fact that the killing of Ahab served to make whole letamem, the two visions, one of Micaiah and the other of Elijah. Before continuing its discussion of Ahab, the Gemara records a mnemonic for the forthcoming statements called merited Edom. It is written, and Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. 1 Kings 18:3. Obadiah was a servant of the wicked Ahab, but Obadiah was righteous, very righteous. The Gemara asks, what is the verse saying? What is the connection between Obadiah's fear of the Lord and the call of Ahab? So Rabbi Yitzchak says that Ahab said to Obadiah, it is written with regard to Jacob, and Lavan said to him, if I have now found favor in your eyes, I have observed the signs, and the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Right? Lavan was a wicked person, but while Jacob was working for him, Lavan prospered, right? For his father-in-law, Lavan, in his household, prospered while Jacob was working for him, because Jacob was a righteous person. And it is written with regard to Joseph that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house, right, Potiphar's house, for Joseph's sake. Right? Potiphar was also not such a sterling character, but Joseph was so righteous that while Joseph was working for Potiphar, Potiphar's house was blessed. So now Ahab has a servant, Obadiah, right? And it seems like Ahab's house is not blessed. So he's thinking, well, maybe the problem is my servant. I know that I'm not so great, but I want to have a righteous servant so that my house will be blessed. And since my house doesn't appear to be blessed, maybe you're not so righteous, says Ahab to Obadiah. Perhaps you do not fear God. Immediately a divine voice emerged and said, now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, but the house of Ahab is not fit for blessing. Right? Potiphar and Lavan, not the greatest people in the world, but Ahab, you're a skunk, a snake, a rat, a wanton criminal murderer, right? Because he, with his queen Jezebel, they were murdering Kohanim right and left. I mean, not just Kohanim, but prophets, right? That was a period in history where there are many prophets and priests, of God, right? Prophets of God and priests serving the temple. And Ahab and Jezebel were just killing them right and left because Jezebel was trying to bring idolatry into Israel. She came from another place and she wanted, people to worship Baal, right? This false god. And she was bringing in her priests of the Baal. And there was finally that big showdown between those false priests and Elijah. But Ahab and Jezebel murdered so many people for the sake of idolatry. So yeah, there's not going to be any blessing in Ahab's house. Rabbi Abba says, the praise that is stated with regard to Obadiah is greater than that which is stated with regard to Abraham. As with regard to Abraham, the verse states, for now I know that you fear God. Genesis 22:12, after the story of the Akedah. And the term greatly is not written, but about Obadiah, the term is greatly. You fear God greatly, right? Obadiah is one who feared the Lord greatly. This is great praise for Obadiah. Rabbi Yitzchak says, for what reason did Obadiah merit prophecy? It is because he concealed 100 prophets in a cave. As it is stated, it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them, 50 men in a cave, and fed them with bread and water. The Gemara asks, what is different? Why did he decide to conceal 50 men in each of 2 caves and not conceal them all together in 1 cave? So Rabbi Lazar says he learned from the behavior of Jacob to do so, as it is stated. And he said, if Esau comes to the one camp and smites it, then the other camp that is left shall escape. So Obadiah learned from this to divide the prophets and thereby lessen the danger. Rabbi Bahu says, it is because there is no cave big enough to contain more than 50 people. The verse states, the visions of Obadiah. So says the Lord God concerning Edom. Edom, the descendants of Esau, this is associated with Rome, eventually, but not in the time of King Ahab. So interesting that Obadiah was already talking about Edom back then. At this point, it's not Rome, but it's the descendants of Esau. So we have heard a message from the Lord. An ambassador is sent among the nations. Arise and let us rise up against her in battle. Says Obadiah, we need to fight Edom. Gemara asks, what is different? I.e., what is the reason that specifically Obadiah prophesied concerning Edom? Rabbi Yitzchak says, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, let Obadiah come, who dwells among 2 wicked ones, Ahab and Jezebel. But he did not learn from their actions, right? He remained good, even while working for these evil people. And so he will prophesy concerning Esau the wicked, the progenitor of Edom, who dwelled among 2 righteous ones, Isaac and Rebekah, but he did not learn from their actions. Ephraim Mikshah, a student of Rabbi Meir, said in the name of Rabbi Meir, Obadiah was an Edomite convert. He was prophesying against Edom, and he was an Edomite, who then converted to Judaism to join the Jewish people. Consequently, he prophesied with regard to Edom. And this is, as people say, from and within the forest comes the axe to it. Meaning that the handle for the axe that chops the tree is made from the forest itself. Right? And the greatest weapon you can use against someone is a traitor from that group. The verse states concerning King David, and he smote Moab, or not a traitor. I mean, Edom would consider him a traitor, but he, outgrew Edom and came to God. The verse states concerning King David, and he smote Moab and measured them with the line, making them lie down on the ground, and he measured 2 lines to put to death. 2 Samuel 8:2. So Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, this is as people say, from and within the forest comes the axe to it, as King David was a descendant of Ruth the Moabite. So when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he stated something similar to this: a thigh rots from within, i.e. when a piece of meat rots, the rotting begins from the inner part of it. Here too, the punishment is administered by one descended from that very nation. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara cites a verse concerning the king of Moab. Then he took his eldest son, who should have reigned in his stead, and sacrificed him for a burnt offering upon the wall. And there was great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. 2 Kings 3:27. So Rav and Shmuel engage in a dispute concerning this. One says, this king, right, this foreign king, the king of Moab, the king sacrificed his own son for the sake of heaven, meaning for the sake of the one true God. And the other says the king sacrificed his son for the sake of idolatry. So was he doing, we don't believe in human sacrifice, but was he doing it in his own twisted way for the sake of God or for the sake of his own idolatrous false god? So the Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who says that the king of Moab sacrificed his son for the sake of heaven, this is as it is written, and there was a great indignation against Israel, as the Gentile attempted to honor God according to his understanding, while at the same time the Jewish people were straying from worshiping God, leading to God's anger against them. Right? Even the foreign people who don't know how to act in a righteous manner were recognizing God and trying to serve him, sadly through something that's prohibited, child sacrifice, but at least they were trying to serve God. Meanwhile, God's own children, the Jewish people, were turning away from God and practicing idolatry. Terrible, right? So this leads to indignation against Israel. But according to the view of the one who says that that the king of Moab sacrificed his son for the sake of idolatry, well then why would the verse state, and there was indignation against Israel? So the Gemara answers, this can be understood in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. As Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi raised a contradiction. It is written concerning the Jewish people, you have not walked in my statutes, neither have you kept my ordinances, nor have you done according to the statutes of the nations that are round about you. Ezekiel 5:7. Well, okay. All that matters of the Jewish people is that we follow God's laws and God's ordinances. And sadly, the Jewish people during periods of history were not doing that. Okay? And they should be rebuked by a prophet like Ezekiel. But why does Ezekiel also say, nor have you done according to the statutes of the nations that are round about you? We're not supposed to follow the statutes of the nations round about us. And it is also written in Ezekiel 11:12, you have done according to the statutes of the nations that are round about you. So it sounds like Ezekiel is accusing the Jewish people, saying, you've done what the nations around you do, and you have not done what the nations around you do. Or you have followed the statutes of the nations around you, and you have not followed the statutes of the nations around you. So which is praise, which is accusation? Sounds like they're both accusation, but how could that be? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi explains, you did not act like the proper ones among the nations, but you did act like the flawed ones among them. The Gemara discusses the end of that verse, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. 2 Kings 3:27. So Rabbi Hanina bar Papa says, at that time, the enemies of the Jewish people, and this is a euphemism for the Jewish people when they are straying away from God, descended to the lowest level. And he interprets la'aretz to mean to the earth, teaching that the Jewish people were as low as the dust of the earth. They had dropped to such a level that they were like Ahab and Jezebel, pursuing idolatry. And the chapter closes with the explication of a verse stated with regard to Abishag, who attended King David in his old age before his death. And the damsel was very fair. Yafa ad me'od. Very fair. 1 Kings 1:14. So Rabbi Hanina bar Papa says she still did not reach half the beauty of Sarah, as in Abraham and Sarah, as it is written, ad me'od, which can be translated as up to very fair, but not including the praise of very fair. By contrast, it is written concerning Sarah, she was very fair. So the Gemara sought to end this chapter on a high note in Jewish history rather than a low note of when the people had strayed so much. And that concludes chapter 4 here in Tractate Sanhedrin, 24th volume of the Talmud. I know the hour is very late. We'll just take a couple of questions. Sharon, maybe I am simplistic and struggle with the mystical, but I always understand the anthropomorphic images of God, throne, hands, etc., was to make God more understandable to humans. The image, for example, at the end of Adon Olam, we speak of placing our soul in God's hand, and I have nothing to fear. It's very comforting to this very limited human. Absolutely. The Torah speaks in the language of people so that we can understand better. I think that's a beautiful way to put that. And Ifa, quinces are hard, golden, apple-like fruit whose flesh turns pinkish when cooked. They are sometimes thought to be the original forbidden apple that caused the fall. And Sharon, it is upon seeing the Egyptians dead on the shore that people of Israel rejoiced and sang. The people, not the angels. Both Moses and Miriam led the people in song at that time. And another reason, another proof that the women, right, are holier, more evolved, greater emunah, greater faith, right? The men sang, but the women danced with tambourines, right? They brought their instruments. They were ready for the celebration. They knew that God would take care of us. That's what I've got for us. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Thursday, regular Thursday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night. Chodesh